Okay, so before we answer how, let's first answer if there are religious people that are scientists. And the answer is yes. Let me give you a few examples and some statistics. Sir Isaac Newton, probably the biggest scientist, was a devout believer. Although he was a Christian, he actually studied Talmud, he learned Hebrew, and in Israel today they have his writings about his religious studies, and they're longer than his scientific writings for which he's famous. He kept them secret because he was head of the Royal Society and he was a little concerned about that, but he was. More recently, Sir Francis Collins, who is the fellow that sequenced the DNA, he has written a very good book on science and religion. He's a devout believer also. And even some of the big proponents of evolution were believers. If you look at the statistics, I have the statistics for the United States. In the United States, about half the scientists are observant or believe in God or a higher being. And more interestingly, the younger scientists, the under 35, more than half believe in God. That's the latest statistics, 2018, I think, from the US. So it definitely happens. And the question is usually asked because people assume that the biblical description of our origins is different than the scientific description of our origins, and therefore there is a conflict. And yes, some scientists have that conflict but put it apart, but most of the scientists I have talked to believe that that conflict can be solved or is already partially solved, and that there isn't such a big conflict. For example, Sir Francis Collins just sees that the DNA is so complicated that it had to be an intelligence that helped that come along. It couldn't have come along naturally. So in short, half the scientists are religious, and the perceived conflict between Torah and science, which we've been talking in many of our talks, is not really there if you really look deeply into the religious sources and the scientific sources.
יהדות טבעי, טבעי לדעת.